All right, I think we're live. So thank you everyone who is in attendance here tonight and all the folks who are out watching us online. Tonight we're going to meet and talk about some upcoming sales tax referendums. Hopefully you've heard a lot about it so far. I've been out and about in the community, and a lot of other folks with the county has, and different groups around the county has been out trying to inform the citizens of what these sales taxes are and what they mean for the voters and the citizens in our community. So we're going to go through a few things tonight. No clicker. Oh, okay. We're going to talk about two different sales taxes that will be on the ballot in November. One is the local option sales tax, and some people call it lost. But as you'll see, the way the numbers work out, you haven't lost anything if this is voted in. And the other one is a capital project sales tax. They're both additional 1-cent sales taxes on certain items that you purchase, but that is where the similarities stop. They are two totally different bodies of tax, and the money that's used in each one goes for two very different things. And we're going to talk about all that tonight. So in South Carolina, there are 46 counties. For those of you not familiar, 46 counties. The ones you see that don't have a coloring shaded are the only 3 counties in South Carolina that don't take advantage of some form of additional 1-cent sales tax. If you'll notice, right on the coast is Georgetown County. We currently do not have any form of 1-cent sales tax in place, but we are surrounded by counties who do. And I'll tell you why that's important later. So the way these taxes work, when you go to the store and you purchase a taxable item, an additional 1-cent sales tax would be charged for each one of these that is voted in. If we vote in both, it will be additional 2 pennies. But the things that most people buy every day, day in and day out, such as groceries, gasoline, prescription medicines, cars, I didn't put that on the list, they're not taxable items. Cars are taxable, but the tax is capped, so there's no additional sales tax on a vehicle when it's purchased. Now, both of these taxes are authorized under South Carolina state law, and they've been around for decades. We've just, in Georgetown County, we've only ever taken advantage of the capital project sales tax we voted it in 2014, and it ran from May of 2015 till April of 2019. It was a 4-year endeavor. But other than that, we've never taken advantage of either one of these sales taxes. Now, just like I told you, the money that's collected from the two sales taxes is used for very different purposes. The sales taxes themselves are also different in that the local option sales tax, if voted in, does not have a time limit. But the capital project sales tax can only run for a maximum of 8 years, and then it has to be voted back in. This is the question that will be on the ballot for the local option sales tax. It's not important to really know what it says. It just says, should we put the local option sales tax in place to help offset property taxes, yes or no? The reason I show you this question is so that you will know what to look for when you go to the polls. It's very important that your voice is heard in this election. If you intend to vote on either one of these questions, this is a very large ballot. It's very long. It's a presidential election. We got state representatives, federal representatives, county council, school board. There's a whole host of things on this ballot, which is going to make the ballot extra long this year. If you intend to cast your vote, you're going to have to scroll all the way to the bottom of the ballot and vote either yes or no, whichever way your heart desires. If you don't do that, your voice will not be heard. And it's important that everybody has a voice in our elections. That's the key takeaway that I want everybody to understand tonight. Make sure your voice is heard at the polls. Now, one reason I put the question up here is to show you this question is about that long on the ballot. When we get to the capital project sales tax question, you will understand what a long question looks like. The way the local option sales tax works is it is distributed to the county and the municipalities within the county to directly offset property taxes. And I'll kind of show you what the calculation looks like. But in state law, the formula is laid out exactly how it works. and the South Carolina Department of Revenue will actually receive the funds from folks paying sales tax, and they will distribute it to the counties and the municipalities according to state law. Now, it's important to note, if it's voted in November, taxes would not start being collected at point of sale until May of 2025. So the first year's tax credit would only be a partial year tax credit, because we would only collect the local option sales tax for a few months, and then the first year would be a smaller credit, and then after that we would have a full year. So what would the credit look like? It would be a share of all sales taxes collected in Georgetown County, which we estimate would be $10 million. These are numbers from the South Carolina Department of Revenue, sales tax collections in Georgetown County for the last 2 years. And I pulled these numbers earlier in the year, so they're not up to date. But if you can see, if we had been collecting that additional penny in 2023, we would have collected $10.25 million. Now, we feel like $10 million is a very conservative number. It's not allowing for any kind of inflation, and it's also not allowing for this unknown portion, which is on the State Department of Revenue's report. There's unknown and unallocated sales taxes that are also showing up on that report as well. I'm sure Georgetown County would receive a portion of that, but we want to be very conservative in our estimates. So what would the estimate show? Again, the way the formula works, 71% of everything that's collected goes to directly offset property taxes. The other 29% is going to be distributed to the county and the municipalities based on a couple of different factors. Of the 71%, 67% would go to the county and 33% would go to the municipalities to offset property taxes. Now, the reason why the municipalities get a little extra share is they pay folks that live in the city of Georgetown and the town of Andrews, they pay city taxes as well as county taxes. So state law allows for those towns to get a little extra share to offset their city and town taxes. The town of Pawleys Island actually does not tax their residents on property taxes, so they wouldn't fall into that bucket. The 29% that goes to the county and the municipalities for operational monies is divided up 50% based on population and 50% based on location of sale. So we don't have real good figures on that because we've never had to track it by location and point of sale and all this stuff. So we've got some estimates as to what that would be, and it's a substantial amount of money. But what does that mean for the average household in Georgetown County? If you look at the average income in Georgetown County by household, it's about $59,800. If you back out everything that people don't pay taxes on, such as their housing costs, their transportation costs, their food costs, their medical costs, that leaves a certain amount of money that they could spend on taxable goods. The average household would spend about $58 a year on the additional 1 cent sales tax. They would spend about $5,800 a year on taxable goods. That would include things like shoes, clothes, furniture, going out to eat at restaurants, things such of that nature. So ultimately, they ended up paying about $58. But what you would get back from the local option sales tax, on average, for the average household, would be about $477. Now, the average home in Georgetown County, to tell you what these numbers look like, the average home is $199,800. So for all intents and purposes, $200,000. But the tax credit does not just go on your home. You also get a tax credit back on your vehicle, your boat, your airplane, your business taxes, your business personal property. Anything you receive a tax notice on during the year, you would receive a local option sales tax credit. It's a separate line on the tax bill is actually how it works. Now, there's a lot of churning. I see some eyes shaking, and y'all looking at this and going, that guy's crazy. There's no way that math works. How in the world could the average household only pay $58, but we're going to get back $477? I can answer that question. About 40% of the sales tax collected in Georgetown County is collected from tourists. So people who come here, they're on vacation, They eat, they dine, they shop, they go to Wings and buy throwaway beach chairs and whatever they do, they're dropping their dollars in Georgetown County through this sales tax. Another portion comes from people who are simply just traveling through. You know, they're going from Conway and going to Charleston. They come down 701. They stop in Georgetown at the convenience store and get a Red Bull so they can go on about their journey. They're dropping pennies in that jar. Another big portion comes from taxable industrial sales. We have a lot of industry in Georgetown County that makes finished product. And when you sell that finished product, the people that buy it have to pay sales taxes on it. So that's why the numbers work out the way they do. Just saying. And y'all can stop me at any time and ask questions, but I do have a place for questions. But I see some burning questions on people's minds. So across the county, what does that look like? If you are in the unincorporated areas of the county, so you don't live in the town of Pawleys Island, town of Andrews, or the city of Georgetown, your credit would look to be about $477. If you live in town of Pawleys Island, which is just the island, it would also be the same because they don't tax their residents on property taxes. In the city of Georgetown, it is, town of Andrews is next down the line, and I used to know that number by heart, but it's $536 in the town of Andrews, and then city of Georgetown would be $653, would be the tax credit coming up on the tax bill. Now, this would include the home and an average vehicle in each home as well. But that's what the numbers look like. If you want to look at your particular property, you can go out to the Georgetown County website, gtcounty.org/lost, L-O-S-T, and right in the middle of the page is a link to this spreadsheet. And you can't hurt it. You can't do anything wrong. The only thing you can change is that box that has the green. And you would go in and plug in your house value there and then scroll down to find your tax district. There's more down the page, but I couldn't put it up on the slide. So you just scroll down the sheet, find which tax district you live in, and it'll show you the credit on your home. There's another tab at the bottom for vehicles and another tab for boats. So if you have a boat or a vehicle, you can put that in and you can see what the tax credit would be, and then look at your total tax credit in the course of the year. Yes, sir. So when I say property taxes, I'm talking about land and home. So real property would be on this tab. So whether it just be a vacant piece of land or a piece of land with a house on it, that would be your real property taxes. And then you would have to go over to the vehicle tab to find out, because vehicles are taxed at a different rate than real property. And your boats would be the third tab. That answer your question? All right, thank you, sir. So I'm sorry, for the folks online, the question was, that spreadsheet, is it just talking about land or just houses? And it could be a combination of both. So if you have a vacant piece of land, you would just put in the value for the vacant piece of land. If you have a land with a home on it, you would put the total value in, because you're only getting one tax bill on a piece of land with a house on it. So this is what the link looks like in the middle of the page for anybody who wants to go out and check it out. I think it's a fantastic tool. And any other questions that we might have? Randy, do we have any questions from anybody online? I'm not sure if that's a possibility.
We do not currently have any questions online. If anybody watching online does have a question, please type it in the YouTube chat, and we will do our best to answer it.
10-4. All right. Yes, sir. So good question. So for the folks online, what the question is how is the amount of credit calculated for each individual's piece of property? So the way the law, state law actually dictates how it's calculated, and it's a weird deal. You take the total taxable value of all property in Georgetown County and divide that by the amount of money that's collected. And you come out with this crazy number that's like 0.0000000 something. So basically you're getting like a fraction of a penny back on every dollar of value of your home or your land or your vehicle. So when you see the local option sales tax credit factor on the tax bill, it's calculating, if I go back to the sheet, it would be calculating, if you look, total loss credit allowable applied. I'm not sure if you can see, I can't read it from here. I might have to step to the side. But the property tax credit factor, you can see that on the third set of numbers down, that 0.002. So in this case, you're getting 0.2 of 1 penny back on every dollar for value on the home. So it would take that 0.00285 times the $200,000 home, and then that's what the credit would be. And at one of the other meetings, since nobody else has any other questions, I'll bring up a couple of questions that were asked earlier. If you're looking at this sheet, the total tax bill on this sheet does not include any other credits. So if you were in an owner-occupied home, for example, you get a big school tax credit back from the state. So that's a big chunk. So somebody got a little upset and said, well, that's not my tax bill. It doesn't look like that. Well, we couldn't calculate the school tax credit on everybody's behalf and put it on the spreadsheet. So that credit's not there. Another thing that came up in the meeting, if you remember when I talked about local option sales tax is in effect until it's voted out. So you vote it in, you have to vote it out. CPST, that we'll talk about next, is only 8 years. Somebody asked me in another meeting, how do I know I'm going to like having the local option sales tax if I've never had it and it lasts basically forever? And I didn't have a good answer for him in that meeting, so I had to think about it a little bit. What I came up with is this. If you go back to this map, we're surrounded by counties that have this thing in place. If you know somebody in Charleston County or Berkeley County or Florence County or Marion County, one of these other counties that have the local option sales tax, they've all had it for a long period of time. Call them and ask them how it works and if they like it. And if you're wondering whether they like it or not, if you count them up, there's about 30 counties all throughout the state that have local option sales tax in place, and it's been around for 25 or 30 years. And to my knowledge, there's never been an attempt to vote it out. So once it goes into a county and people see that tax credit, they tend to like it. Yes, sir. Well, that's why the voters have a choice. The process goes, county council passed an ordinance that said send it to the ballot and let the voters choose. So that's why we're having these meetings to help people understand exactly what it is and to ask questions. It's not in place yet, but it's important for people to go out. If you don't like what you see, vote no. If you kind of like what you see, vote yes. And if you have doubts, then because there's only certain things I can say. I'm sorry, I hit my mic. I can educate folks about the capital project sales tax, but I can't advocate. I can't give you my opinion in an official setting. So that's why I say if you know somebody that lives in one of these other counties that has had local option sales tax in place, and we're surrounded by them, so as long as you know a neighbor, you can put it in, you can ask them what they think about it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the question for the online folks was, would the local option sales tax cover multiple properties? The answer is yes. Every single tax notice, so each individual property gets its own tax notice. Every single tax notice has the credit on it. So every property has a credit applied to it. So if you own 25 or 30 or 40 or 50 different pieces of property, each one of those properties would have that credit applied. Yep. So for the folks online, the question is, with the other counties that I have on the map, do they have to vote for the local option sales tax every 8 years? The answer is no. The local option sales tax, once you vote it in, it's in place until you vote it out. The capital project sales tax, which is the next one we'll talk about, that's the one that can only be for 8 years. Hope that helps. Any other questions on local option sales tax? I don't know the exact mechanics, but in order to hold any kind of referendum, a couple of different things can happen. You either go to county council and petition county council to put a referendum on the ballot. It's really the easiest way to do it. The other way is to get a certain percentage of signatures from registered voters in the county, and I think it's like 5% of registered voters. You get that many signatures, then you can put a referendum on the ballot. So there's multiple different avenues to get that done. Tenfold. All right. I'm sorry, I got to get all the way back. I went almost back to the beginning of the presentation. So, next item we'll talk about capital project sales tax. Now, remember earlier I said the only similarities really between capital project sales tax and local option sales tax is they would both be an additional 1 cent on certain items that you buy. Now you're going to see what I'm talking about. Both local option sales tax and capital project sales tax are authorized under state law. There's a very specific way that things have to be done. Local option sales tax is much simpler. The only thing from a county council standpoint that needed to be done, pass an ordinance, send it to the voters. With capital project sales tax, they had to initiate a capital project sales tax commission before anything could happen. The commission's responsibility was to solicit project ideas from the public. And so that's what they did. There was a commission was formed. They went all around the county. They heard all kind of project ideas, and 60 some odd projects were submitted to the commission for consideration. Then the commission, its other responsibility was to come up with a list of projects to send to the voters, okay? So the commission comes up with the list of projects, and county council says, this is a good list, let's send it to the voters, or we don't like this list, we're not sending it to the voters. They can't change it, they can't add a project, they can't take a project off, they can't reorder the projects, they have to be listed just as the commission sent it forth. So that is exactly what happened. Now, I spoke earlier that we had a capital project sales tax in place several years back. We voted it in 2014, tax was collected from 2015 to 2019. There were tons and tons and tons of projects on that list. Now, a couple of things are still kind of left undone from that original list due to several different factors. One of them is the Winyaw Bay dredging. And for folks who remember what happened with that one, there was a huge portion of grant money from the federal government attached to that dredging. The total project at the time was estimated to be, I think, about $36 million. The federal government was supposed to contribute $30 million, so the voters voted in a $6 million project. Well, the grant funding fell through and the whole thing collapsed. So we're still sitting there with $6 million, which is going to be enough to do some dredging. I think we've maybe got some additional money just in the last couple, 3 months, and now we might be able to get a portion of the dredging done, not the main channel, but maybe the inner harbor. And the reason I tell you all this is back when capital project sales tax was done then, it was very different under state law. Things like that popped up all across the state. It wasn't just Georgetown County. The other thing that happened back during that initial one, the county at the time thought it was going to collect $7 million a year for 4 years, $28 million. They actually collected $41 million. So then they were left with $13 million extra dollars and no projects to do anything with that they could actually afford to do. You had the dredging project, of course, but 13's not, and that price tag went up to about 60 million. So that was happening all over the state with capital project sales taxes. So it kind of put county council in a pickle. You know, they had no voice from the people to say this is what we want done, but then they had to decide what to do with the money. So the legislature came up and they changed state law. And they said, we're not going to do it like that anymore. We're going to have 2 project lists that the voters vote on. We're going to have a list of primary projects. So these are the items that get done first. And then we're going to have a list of contingency projects. So if there's additional money or some grants come in or something, or we collect more sales taxes, there's a whole nother list of projects that has to be done before anything else happens. So when the commission was formed and they solicited their project ideas, they made 2 lists to comply with state law. There's a priority project list and a contingency project list. Now, the commission focused on projects that prioritized health, safety, and wellness. They thought that a project that touched the entire county maybe had more merit than a project that touched one small area. That was part of their methodology for whittling down a list of $220 million worth of projects down to a manageable list that we think we might possibly be able to fund. So that was part of the methodology. Now, the other thing, and you'll see this on the list, and I'll talk about it a little bit, the commission wanted to make sure, remember county council couldn't change the order of the projects. I said that earlier. The commission wanted to make sure that the projects as listed were listed in such a way that the community could see a little bit of bang for the buck kind of right out the gate. So some of the projects that don't take maybe as much money are higher on the list, not necessarily what the commission thought was the most important projects. And I'll explain that when we get to it. Now, as I said, this is an 8-year endeavor. If we vote that tax in November, the taxes start getting collected in May of 2025. So that's year 0. Then 1 year later, May of 2026, 2 years later, May of 2027, all the way down to year 9, which is when the taxes stop being collected. And then you got time after that projects will still be being done, because you have to collect the money before you can pay for the projects, right? So we can't do the projects, if we're collecting money for 8 years, we can't do the projects in 8 years. It's going to take a little bit longer. So everybody has to understand this is not an immediate process, but we do have a way to speed it up a little bit, and we'll talk about that in just 1 second. Now, what do the projects look like? Remember, there's 2 lists. So this is only the priority list. We got $42 million worth of water and sewer projects, health, safety, and wellness. In those projects, there are one of the projects, the single biggest project, is a project to put a sewer system in Sampit. And anybody familiar with that area understands the need for it. When it rains, most of those folks can't flush their toilet. The old septic systems are failing, the soil condition is poor. That, for the commission, was the top priority project, but it is not number 1 on the list. Remember the bang for your buck? And I'll show you on the list in just a minute. That's actually number 9 down on the list. There are 8 projects above it. Most of them are small, and part of the reason being when you're dealing with water and sewer projects, you have lengthy permitting. So if the Sampit sewer project was the first on the list, it's not going to get started for about 1.5 years anyway because of permitting. So we don't want to hold everything else up waiting on that one project to get started. In these water and sewer projects, there's one, it's actually in the town of Andrews. It's $600 and something thousand, but the project is over $6 million. They have a grant in hand for almost $6 million to do this project. So they need a 10% match to go with the USDA money. The commission felt that was also important because it stretches those dollars out. If we can do projects with less CPST dollars and more grant dollars, we get more things done. On the public safety side, $15 million. The biggest single project in that is a new EOC and 911 facility. When that EOC 911 facility was built 3 decades ago, Georgetown County only had about 40,000 people in it. We literally don't have enough room to put another 911 operator in that building. And the county's got 65,000 people and growing every day. People have found us. They're coming. So we need to be prepared. We need to get ahead of it, okay? There's a fire station in there, actually 2 fire stations in that money. And for stormwater, the biggest project in stormwater is a stormwater drainage facility in the Parkersville community. It's some new piping, goes down MLK. And then there's a couple of different stormwater drainage projects in the city of Georgetown. Transportation projects. This is another one where grant money comes into play. Actually, both of the transportation projects are grant related. One is for $1 million for the city of Georgetown to widen Black River Road that goes down by the hospital. This is a $6 million project, $6.5 million, but DOT is funding $5.5 million of it. So that stretches the CPST dollar. The other project is about a $3.5 million project for the Waccamaw Regional Transit Authority to build a bus terminal somewhere in the city. If anybody's familiar where they pick the bus riders up now, it's over beside the Piggly Wiggly on that side street by the cleaners. They don't have any kind of shelter. They got a little bench with the little top over it, but if it's raining, if it's hot, if the wind's blowing, if the rain's blowing sideways or it's sleeting, they have to be out in the weather. They don't have a place to go to the bathroom. This would be an indoor facility with a waiting room and a lobby they could sit in and wait on the bus to come. 80% of that's funded with a grant. It's about a $3.5 million project. They need $600 and some odd thousand. So again, it stretches those dollars. And you'll see that on the ballot. These projects that are related to grants, it'll say, for example, City of Georgetown, $1 million for a road widening project, as grant, $1 million as grant match funding for road widening project. And you'll see as grant match funding along and along and along. And I think that's very important to remember. Remember back to the dredging. If the people who put that together back then, if state law was written the way it is now, they would have kind of taken that into account, because most of that project was grant funding from the federal government, but it wasn't in hand. So the county, based on good faith and credit, said, well, we've been told we're going to get it, but you didn't have it in hand. So they went ahead, and all the people in the county, I was one of them, I voted for it, and then the grant falls through and we don't have enough money to fund the project. So the commission was very, very concerned with something like that happening again. So unless the grant was in hand, we didn't count on it. The commission didn't count on that grant. Now, in that $42 million of water and sewer, there's only about $6 million in grants, but every one of those projects is capable of receiving additional grant money from USDA, the Rural Development Authority. There's 3 or 4 different areas where grant money can come from for water and sewer. So every dollar that we ultimately receive in grants offsets that price tag and allows more money to be put down into the contingency project list. Going on down, we talked about, to finish up the list, recreation projects. I'll catch you in just one second. Recreation projects, there's 3 different recreation projects across the county. Public services facilities, the biggest one there is a facility out at our landfill, the county landfill. They currently don't have a place to work on big equipment, bulldozers, trackhoes, and if anybody's ever been in a landfill, that's massive equipment. What they currently have to do is put a 100,000 pound or 120,000 pound bulldozer on a truck and haul it down the road, which is time consuming, it costs money, it takes that out of operation for a whole lot longer. They need a covered facility to park that stuff under so they can actually do maintenance on it and work. Yes, sir. different grants can be held for, I'm sorry. So for the folks online, the question was, if you receive a grant, how long can that grant money be held for? It varies by agency, and it varies by the type of grant and the type of project that the grant is being for. Grant agencies understand water and sewer projects take an extensively long time. It's not like I'm buying a fire truck, right? If I got a grant to buy a fire truck, I order the fire truck, we pay for the fire truck, it's pretty much done. It takes about a year to get a fire truck. But with water and sewer projects, it can take 3, 4, 5 years to get them built. So some of those grants will last longer. Some of them would be shorter depending on the agency that it comes from. That, no, no, right, well, there still wouldn't be a need for that. There wouldn't be a need to move that project because, well, number one, Georgetown County Water and Sewer District is not going to apply for a grant for that project unless this gets voted on. Because the worst thing you can do is get a grant and then give it back. When you go out to a grant agency, they want that money to get spent. It's more work on them to have to take that money back and then give it to somebody else. Sometimes that grant money gets lost in the federal budget or the state budget or wherever. So Georgetown County Water and Sewer, number one, is not going to apply for the grant unless this gets voted in on. Number two, as I said before, particularly with sewer, it's a very lengthy engineering and permitting process. The folks at Georgetown County Water and Sewer, when they pitched the project, said it would be at least 18 months before they ever could even think about start digging dirt. Generally, right now in the state of South Carolina, it's a minimum of 12 months to get a permit for sewer. So I kind of hope that answers your question, but maybe not. I'm not sure. Yep. All right, so going on down, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. You got to get the money in before you can do the project. So think of it as pay as you go, right? As we collect money in, now we got money to do projects. Now, I said this before, the projects will be funded as they're listed on the ballot. They'll be funded in that order. So as money comes in, project number one has to be done, and project number two, project number three. And I think I can help with your question in just a little bit, and you'll see what I'm talking about. The only exception to the pay-as-you-go is if we issue bonds to fund the projects. Now, you will see on the ballot in just 1 minute, there is a part of the question that says, is Georgetown County authorized, not commanded, but authorized to issue bonds to pay for the county projects? There's about $23 million worth of county projects on the priority list, on that list. Now you ask, why would the county want to issue bonds? If you add these numbers up, it's about $73 million worth of projects on the priority list. But remember that $10 million a year for 8 years, that's about $80 million. So why wouldn't we put $80 million worth of projects on the priority list? The answer is inflation. Construction inflation runs about 5% a year. Okay, so we have to allow some room, because this is an 8-year process. We have to allow room for inflation. But then it goes back to, why would the county want to issue bonds? Georgetown County's done a fantastic job with its finances. They have a AA- credit rating. What that means is, in the current market, things could change, but in the current market, Georgetown County could issue this short-term debt, 8-year debt short-term, for about 3%. So you're beating inflation by 2%. So if it makes sense for county council to borrow that money to overcome inflation by 2%, then county council could borrow the money. Now, what happens to the money that you save in inflation? You just roll down on the contingency list and pick up a few more projects. So that's why that's actually there. Now, Remember when I talked about when we did CPST before 2014, state law was different. They changed state law to say you got to have that contingency list, but they also made another change. Now, if you issue a CPST, the State Department of Revenue comes in and does an audit on every project. They are looking for every I to be dotted and every T to be crossed. That was not the case 6 years ago when we did the last capital project. And there's still a project hanging out that there's some issues around. We wanted to make sure this time that we had everything in place so we could comply with state law and make sure we didn't have any projects hanging out after this one that had issues. So we put a funding agreement in the ordinance. That's what county council put in the ordinance. We're calling it a funding agreement. What it does is it says a couple things. Whoever is in charge of the project, we call them sponsoring entities. So whether it be Georgetown County Water and Sewer District, whether it be Browns Ferry Water, whether it be City of Georgetown, Town of Andrews, Rural Water, whoever it is, Waccamaw Regional Transit Authority, all those are sponsoring entities. Whoever that sponsoring entity is has to enter into that funding agreement and say, I'm only going to do a project that was voted on by the voters. The project that we submitted in detail in a packet to the commission. I'm going to go out and I'm going to bid this project out using the most restrictive of that entity's procurement policy or the county's procurement policy, whichever one has the most restrictions. Then when all the bids come in, we're going to turn those over to the county so they can review it to make sure it matches. Because ultimately the county's on the hook for this money, right? The county, once it says, okay, everything matches up, you're good to go, start your project. They start the project. Then they need money to pay the vendors, pay the contractors. Before any checks are written, they have to bring the invoices to the county so they can see that they match up to the bid. Then the county will write them a check and they can pay the vendors. Before the next check is written, they have to show proof that the first set of invoices were paid. So we know the county money is being used in the proper manner. This is very important. About a year ago, there was another county in the state that didn't dot the I's and didn't dot the T's on an $18 million project, and they had to write a check and give it to DOR because they didn't use the money the right way. We don't want to find ourselves in that situation, which is why we have to put things like this in place. Everybody kind of get that? Now, exactly, yep. We're not just going to write a check to Georgetown County Water and Sewer District and say, have at it, and we're writing a check for the Sanford Sewer Project, and they go build something out in Timbuktu somewhere. Now, remember that question for the local option sales tax. Remember, it was about 2/3 of the way down the screen. Well, this is the first part of the capital project sales tax. I call it the preamble. So the whole question for capital project sales tax goes on and on and on and on and on till you finally get down to yes or no. Okay? Very, very, very lengthy question. So again, if you intend to vote, if you intend to make your voice heard on this particular question, you have to go all the way to the end of the ballot. I was talking to our folks over at Voters Registration not long ago, and they told me that about 65% of people in Georgetown County vote straight party ticket. I thought, man, that's a high number. It's actually higher than that on a national level. My fear is people who vote straight party ticket, that's what they're used to doing, they're going to go in, hit their straight party ticket, and submit their vote and walk away. These don't get a vote if you vote straight party ticket. If you want to vote, you have to go all the way down to the end of that ballot and check yes or no on those two questions. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So the question for the folks online is, are these questions, the local option sales tax question and the capital project sales tax question, on the sample ballots? The answer is yes, they are. But they're all the way on the end, so you got to go all the way to the end. I wish we could be up front, but of course they're going to put the partisan elections up front, and our local stuff gets down at the bottom. But I just think it's critical for everybody to remember, don't just hit straight party ticket, cast my vote, and walk out. Because a lot of people are used to that. You know, that's what they're used to doing when they go to the polls. This is a year in which these are important questions. And people need to make sure their voice is heard at the polls. Now, back to the order. If you'll notice, first project up on the list is a Browns Ferry water project. It's about a little over $2 million, right? $3 million, actually, I'm sorry. This project is what is actually shovel ready. They're doing part of it now with a USDA grant. This would be a continuation. So this project can get done out the gate. And the commission wanted to put some smaller projects up front. So in the grand scheme of things, the $3 million project, believe it or not, is a smaller project. So they wanted to put some smaller projects up. If you add up everything above Project 9, it's about $10 million. Actually, about $9 million. So that's less than 1 year of revenue, because we're going to get $10 million in a year. It's going to take about 18 months to kick that Sampit Sewer project off. So by the time we get done funding the first 8, we'll have enough money to get started on the Sampit Sewer project. They'll already have their engineering and permitting and stuff going, and by the time they get ready to start digging dirt, we'll have enough money to get the project going. So that's why it's structured the way it is, and I hope that answers your question from before. Now, if you'll notice, there's 22 items on the priority project list, okay? If you go back up, you'll notice there's several up on the first few, like project number 2, City of Georgetown, $1,040,000 as grant match funding. And you'll see that through several of those projects. Now, one hot item project for the county is on the contingency list. It's $1 million as grant match funding to dredge Murrells Inlet. That's actually a $36 million project. Part of that grant money is currently in hand, but the other part is not in hand. We don't want to find ourselves in the same predicament we were several years ago, where we didn't get all the grant money, so it's on the contingency list. The contingency list is different than the priority list. Anything on the priority list has to be funded, but anything on the contingency list, if the grant doesn't come in, it doesn't necessarily have to be funded. Okay? Hope that helps with that. But there's several really fantastic projects on both lists. I don't think there's a bad project on either list. That was actually part of what was so hard for the commission was, you know, if you got 10 really good projects and 20 crappy projects, it's easy to weed them out. But every project was fantastic. They all focused on some aspect of health, safety, and wellness to the larger degree. And it made the commission's job very, very hard to whittle this list down to what it is. So 22 items on the priority list, 19 items on the contingency list, and then the final part of the question talks about, does the county have the authority, if the market is right, does the county have the authority to issue those bonds to pay for the county projects? Remember, those are, it's a fire station, the EOC 911 center, the facility out at the landfill, and some small recreation facilities. It's about $23 million in total. I can't remember what all the projects are, but that would allow the county to go ahead and do those up front, and then as the money comes in for the CPST, that dollars would be used to pay back the bond. It wouldn't be any additional taxes for the citizens. That was a lot. So hopefully somebody's got some questions, because there's no way I covered everything.
We're collecting some written questions from the audience here in person. I just want to take this opportunity to remind anybody online that if you do have some questions, please type them in the chat and we will answer them.
All right. Got several written questions. And I'm going to do my best with these bad old eyes to read these questions. So the first question concerns capital project sales tax. It says, will the Black River Road project happen regardless of CPST? My understanding is yes. I think the city of Georgetown is committed to doing that Black River Road project for a host of reasons. One reason is it's funded almost entirely by a grant from DOT. If DOT ends up coming up with a little bit more money, the project's going to be done by DOT regardless of what anybody says. But from my time with the city, what I remember is that the original lines for the water and sewer system that were laid back in 1900-something are the ones down Black River Road. I saw pictures in the library when they were putting them down. So the city eventually has to dig those lines up. That would actually be paid for with the grant. So it would behoove the city greatly to go ahead and do that project. So I think it gets done one way or the other. But I'm not certain on that. That's just my opinion. Will the road still be widened, and how does CPST impact this project and funding? I should have read the whole. I thought it was two separate questions. I stopped at the first question mark. I think I answered the rest of that question as well. Next question, is the bonding question a separate question or vote? So 3 votes in total. No, it is not. If you go back and look, if you start all the way from the beginning of the CPST question, if you notice, there's no yes or no here. That's what I call the preamble to the question. Should we do it for these purposes? And then you list all the purposes are listed on the ballot. And then you finally get down, there's the section with bonding and yes or no. So there's only 2 yeses or 2 nos involved in lost and CPST. One for lost and one for CPST. Not a separate question, but great question. Thank you. I think we've covered this one. This is our next question. Will the Black River Road project happen by SCDOT even if CPST fails? And will trees be cut down regardless? As I said before, I'm pretty sure that project is going to have to be done eventually. And whether we take advantage of SCDOT dollars or the city funds at all, I think that's an inevitable project from my understanding. Next question, why don't we have all the grant money? What happened with the dollars from Merle's Inlet dredging? Why didn't we get on the primary list when we paid a majority of taxes? I think I addressed that earlier. So the grant money for the Merle's Inlet dredging is coming from 2 different sources. And from my understanding, one source has given the county the money. The other source has not yet completely committed those funds. It's not in hand at this point. So according to state law, if we put a project on the priority list, this was another part of the question, if we put a project on the priority list, it has to be fully funded. Okay? So that means that $36 million project, which is almost half of the total 8 years, would have to be fully funded. The other part of that question says, why don't we get on the primary list when we pay the majority of the taxes? You have to remember this is sales tax. Now, I don't have good numbers and good data behind this, but I think you have to really look at where all the sales tax is coming from. Remember, about 40% is coming from tourism, and the Merle's Inlet area is not the only tourist community in Georgetown County. Tourists visit all areas of the county, so you can't say the entire 40%. I don't know what percentage it is, but it's definitely not the entire 40%. A huge portion comes from finished product industrial sales. Not a lot of that on the Waccamaw Neck. So I really don't think it's fair to say that the Waccamaw Neck produces the majority of sales taxes. Okay? Hopefully that answered that question. I'm not sure who asked it. Any other questions, Randy, online?
We do not have any questions online.
I must have did a good job. All right. Any other burning questions in somebody's heart out in the audience? Hearing none, I say end of the show. We'll wrap it up. If you think of one before I leave, I'm glad to answer any questions offline. Just let me know. But thank you all for coming out, and for everybody online, thank you for watching.